Hello, today we're going to talk about Africa. Africa was originally just a bunch of small tribes or city states that just trade between each other. But then the Europeans came in and basically took over the country. They divided it amongst themselves without even asking any African representatives. And they basically just ran the country. In 1960s, around then, they gained their independence. And at this point, things didn't go very well because you had government after government popping up. And then when those governments went down, the military took over. So there's no consistency. The Europeans originally came to Africa for trade. The biggest thing they ended up trading with was slaves. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The Cold War led to instability in Africa also because the U.S. and Soviets would back any dictator or whichever dictator would help them out. So if a dictator went to the United States and said, "Hey, you help me out, I could do this for you." If the United States said no, they just go to the Soviet Union. So that was not a great thing, the Cold War. When the Cold War ended, it did not help any either. There's still warfare all the time in Africa. North Africa was dominated by the Sahara Desert. It continues to grow every year due to drought. The Arabs, they came through at one point, and the Arab army came through and basically forced Islam on northern Africa. And it made Islam the main religion, and now their main language is Arabic. All right, Central Africa. Central Africa is mostly tropical rainforest surrounded by the savanna. The Congo River Basin covers much of the central interior. That's got a tropical climate. There are many different ethnic groups and religious groups here. This is where most of Europe took its slaves from. Now, it wasn't Europe just coming over here and just trapping African Americans and bringing them over. What it was bigger tribes of Africans basically captured all of the smaller tribes, and when they did that, they sold them to the Europeans for goods and weapons and whatever else they needed. So it wasn't the Europeans coming over here and trapping people, African Americans. It was actually the Africans that sold the slaves to the Europeans. And most of this happened in Central Africa. Britain was the first one to end slavery. The nations in Central Africa and most of Africa is due to bad governments. So like I said before, the governments were corrupt. It was one government popping up and they didn't like then some people in that government group didn't like what they were doing. So they either took over and they became another government group, and then the military would take over. So just not a lot of consistency. A lot of these places, either the military or just one party ran things. And if you just have one party running things, the government becomes very one-sided. We have a multi-party system here. We actually have more than two, but most people just think we have two, so they think we have to vote for Democratic or Republican here. But you can vote for a third party all you want. Just nobody does. Not many people, at least. So they tried to incorporate socialism and communism in some of these places. So the government ran some of the businesses. They were very, very bad at it, so they became poor. They've borrowed a lot of money from other countries that they might not ever be able to pay back. So now Southern Africa. Southern Africa is more temperate than the North because the North is on the equator, or by the equator. It sits on the southern plateau, except for the Namib and Kalahari Desert. All the soil there is good for cattle and crops. And white Europeans in Zimbabwe and South Africa made special rules that gave them power, money, and best jobs. This was called the apartheid. Apartheid. Yeah, I'll call it apartheid. This was a horrible event that happened in Africa, and it ended in 1994. That's all I'm going to talk about with that. But that was basically white Europeans that did that. They basically made rules to make their lives much easier, make everybody's life much harder and horrible. All right, this has been Africa. Hope it helped, and good luck.